Great news here at Binchook Nation. We have received full media accreditation for the Sanctuary Cove Boat Show, and I'm very much looking forward to that. It is Monday now. That will be starting on Thursday through until next Sunday. I hope to do some walkthrough boat tours. Particularly, I'm interested in looking at what's available new in the sailing industry, but also let's have a look at the luxury industry, shall we? See what some of these luxury boats look like inside. That's going to be fantastic. Looking forward to that. More videos to come. But I thought before starting that, why not make one more video looking back and talking about how I got my boat seaworthy for its first ocean-going voyage with me as a captain. Lists are your best friend. In the previous video I talked about how I was working through things and it got a bit overwhelming when I'd fix one thing and there'd be two more that I'd find. But finally I got down to about, I remember I had a list up there on the wall, about 21 items. Now what were some of those things on the list that I was preparing? Well, the boat was going to sea, so I was aware that there'd be a lot of movement in the boat and there were items that I needed to check with regard to that. Fuel tanks are a big one. If a boat hasn't been to sea for a while, the fuel tank could have a lot of gunk in the bottom of it, while when you go to sea, that's going to mess that all up, go through your filters, block your filters, boom, suddenly you haven't got a motor. So I put a fuel treatment through the tank. I used a product called Fuel Doctor. Looked at a sample of once I did that treatment, the fuel went a yellowy colour. Sent that photo off to the manufacturer. They said, that's fine, it's not that far gone. If you've only got half a tank with that, fill your tank to new, add another treatment and then run that through. So I did that, replaced my filters, learnt how to replace my filters and bleed the engine if I needed to at sea. Whether I would have been able to do that rocking around at sea, I don't know, but at least I went through that process. I checked all through fittings on the hull. I've got through fittings in the cockpit that go right through. I made sure all those fittings were tight. I checked all the seacocks. I checked all connections to the batteries, made sure they were tight and they were tidy. There wasn't going to be a situation where they might have rattled loose and suddenly we lost all instrumentation or whatever. So these were some of the things that I was checking. I checked all my lights, made sure all my lights were working if we needed to be sailing at night. So these were some of the items that I checked to ensure the boat was ready to go to sea. In the process of getting the boat ready, it did take a bit longer than expected. I was on some mooring waiting lists on the Clarence River, one in Yamba West and one in Aluka Bay, and they were on hold for a long time. Could have been a COVID, well, there were reasons that people gave, but the thing was they weren't going ahead. We don't need to go into that now. Because it was taking me so long, Maritime pulled me up and said, you've told us you were going to be leaving, you haven't left. We are now going to fine you and possibly seize your boat. They kind of pushed me into a corner. So I made a video about that, kind of just asking what's happening with maritime moorings. Making that video actually went viral. And after making that video, I had lawyers contact me, all sorts of people contact me. And one person contacted me and they told me of the Marine Safety Act of 1998, that no captain shall go to sea if they believe their boat is deemed unseaworthy. And that law trumps all other laws. You are the captain of your boat. If you believe it's unseaworthy, they cannot force you to go to sea, which is understandable. If you own a boat, you have to take it very seriously going to sea. You don't want to be putting yourself or crew or rescuers in any danger because you haven't made full preparations. And I took that very seriously, and I was aware that I am the captain of this boat and I had to ensure as best as I could this boat was safe. And so I took that job very seriously. Doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes, which I can talk about on the trip as we continue on. The other thing that was necessary for me was to know this boat sailing. To get, a friend of mine said he believes one of the biggest things with sailing is getting the muscle memory to put your sails up to bring your sails down. So I practiced a lot of that, and when I look back at some of those early videos of me sailing with a big grin on my face. The sail trim, the look of the sail, it was embarrassing. But you know, you work your way up. Tested the autopilot, got to know the autopilot. So this boat is very well equipped, has an autopilot. Looked at that. I also had to get navigation gear for this boat, and I was very happy with how that turned out. I did my research, and I got a Samsung tablet. I got Navionics. You pay a subscription for Navionics. I put a swing arm that I bought on Temu or something on the stairwell that could swing out and move closer to the cockpit if needed, or move back depending on weather. Generally happy with the way that worked. All the bolts are rusted, so China special. Anyway, so I was very happy with how that worked, and that was a bit of a game changer to be able to, even now, to have Navionics and to be able to use their auto feature just to plot in a course, and to be able to anchor based on looking at the depth from the Navionics charts. So that was a success, and I was very happy with how that turned out. And that was a cheap option to buy a Samsung tablet with GPS to have your navigation. Crew. I wasn't going to do it by myself. I wasn't capable enough. It would have been dangerous. I had some friends who were keen to do it with me. I had a choice of people I could have done it with. Some people were very skilled in being able to fix anything. They were handymen. I chose a guy who was a very good sailor, who happened to have a similar boat to mine. So Matt owns a Currawong 30, which is also a half-tonner. I was lucky to join him for a sailing trip from Ballina to the Gold Coast. So we'd already done half the trip with no troubles. You also want to be with someone who's on a calm head. You don't want to be with someone who's a stress head, who can't handle pressure. I saw how he carried himself. He wasn't someone who got, had problems with dealing with stress. He was a calm head. I wanted that. I didn't want someone who was going to make things more stressful. That's something you've got to think about. I've been involved with, remember going out once with a boat on Yamba Yacht Club, and there was a guy who just ruined it for everyone, because he knew everything, and he overreacted to grounding. So what? You know, you ground, you sort it out. Anyway, let's move on. Let's have a sip of coffee before we continue. The other important thing in doing the trip is understanding weather, tides, bars, and the capabilities of your boat. So, Matt knew the Ballina Bar. We went from Iluka to Ballina. He knew the bar very well because he had his boat moored on the Richmond River. He was aware that we wanted a swell of less than 1.5 metres to cross that bar safely. Also, we needed a high tide and an incoming tide. With an outgoing tide, that makes the waves jack up when it hits the ocean, and that's when you can get problems. So we had to time our trip with relation to hitting or going through that bar with a small swell and incoming tide. My boat points very well to the wind, so we did that trip on a northwesterly with the wind nearly, sort of on a, what would you call it, a close reach, I think is the term. I'm not great with my sailing terms, but we were nearly pointing into the wind, and that wasn't a problem for my boat. Handles it very well. Other boats, if you've got a catamaran or other boats, you may, so every boat, you've got to look at your boat and how it handles. Like I've got a mate who's got a 60-foot schooner. He's really not looking at even going out unless it's 25 knots, and his boat can handle that. With a 30-footer, 10 to 30 knots is good, and you've got to look at the capabilities of your boat. The weather window. I met a couple from the Netherlands who had been sailing around the world for 7 years, and I said to them, what has been the most dangerous situation for you on a boat? And surprisingly, it wasn't being at sea. They said being on anchor in 50 knots. And I said, what about when you've been at sea? Hasn't there been rough seas? And they said a good sailor, a patient sailor, always has good winds. A patient sailor always has good winds. You wait for the right weather window to ensure you're safe, and you do the trip with as little hassle as possible. So doing the actual trip, the sailing from Iluka to Ballina, this was a problem in my preparation. I hadn't realised that my radio had done a fuse, so we didn't have a radio. Big problem. I did have backup though. I had contingency plans, and this is something that's always good to think about, to have a contingency plan, to have a backup. I had a handheld radio. How that would have went offshore with its range, who knows. That was not a good situation. A simple blown fuse that was very easy to replace at Ballina, but could have put us in a bad situation. That was on me and my preparation. Trip went generally well. When we did cross Ballina Bar, we also had another problem where the motor cut out just as we were crossing the bar. Now Matt was on the tiller crossing the bar because he knew the bar, and I was happy for him to do that because you know it's a notorious bar. A lot of people have died on that bar. He knew which lines to take, and we didn't want any hassles when we were that close to finishing the journey. Unfortunately, what happened, my accelerator is set up in reverse to other boats. Most other boats you push forward to accelerate. Mine is set up in a way that you pull back to accelerate. We think what happened was Matt operating the tiller and pulling, wanting more acceleration to get across that bar, actually turned it off. Thinking it was like a regular boat. We handled that without any stress. I said to Matt, "You continue steering. Let me start the motor." Started the motor. Couple of seconds of tight throat, whatever you want to say, of stress, but we handled it. We didn't panic. We got the motor going again, and then I started handling the accelerator. I said, "You just steer, and I'll do the accelerator." So we got through that. Also, when we sailed from Ballina to the Gold Coast, towards the end of the day, the wind picked up quite a bit, and we had to put in 2 reefs, and from Tweed to the Gold Coast we were pounding into a short swell, northerly swell, and the boat was just, we were getting covered in water. Water was coming in through the air vents, and water was coming through the chain plates, which was a bit of a problem because I had gone to the trouble of putting Sikaflex and sealing the chain plates. So that gives you I'm going to have to look at that because someone told me that sometimes when boats sail, they actually put like Glad wrap or something similar over your chain plates to not have that problem. Because we were, as I said, Matt was a really good sailor, and I wanted to know how this boat went. I wanted to know how it was as a sailing boat. It performed very well. To paraphrase Matt, and I may not be using the correct language, and he may not be happy with this, but I think he said it was the best 30-foot half-tonner that he's ever sailed on, the fastest. As I said, I'm paraphrasing Matt. He definitely said it was quicker than a Currawong 30. Even Gandalf the Great, on seeing the footage of Sequondo pounding through the waves at great speed and with great finesse, who'd previously disparagingly, previously said to me, "Just try and get the boat to Airlie Beach and flog it off." He wasn't a fan of an old wooden boat. He even said, "Oh no, but I never said it wouldn't sail well." So our boat performed very well, which was great for me to experience and to know that she goes quick for her size, and it was safe. But when we got to that section from the Tweed to the Gold Coast, we had a very wet ride, and the boat started taking on water. Contingency plans: I had a spare battery and a spare bilge pump, and this is probably another thing I've got to look at why it was building up water below the stairs. But all the water was forming below the stairs. The other bilge pumps hadn't set in, so I started filling buckets, using this battery, using the spare bilge pump. 28 buckets of water lifted up the stairs, handed to Matt. So we were really pounding into the weather. and every now and then Matt would be up in the cockpit and oh no, where a wave had just come over and absolutely saturated. But look, we arrived at the Seaway on dark. He's a member of the Southport Yacht Club, so we pulled in there, had a shower, had a feed, and we lost no fingers and no limbs, and no one was injured, and we made it safely. And that's all you can hope for in any trip. And so I hope you enjoyed that little story of getting the boat ready, doing that first ocean trip, the lessons I learnt from it, and look forward to this coming week where I'll be making a lot of videos doing walkthrough boat tours of some of the newer boats that are out there, luxury boats, sailing boats. It should be great fun. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for listening.